Welcome back to rcFoamFighters Bulletproof Plane Build Along number 1. We're going to go ahead and continue on with phase 2 of the build here, but first I just wanted to make an announcement. I've gone ahead and posted that list that I'd mentioned in one of the other videos on all the parts that you're going to need to complete phase 2 of the build. So please be sure to check out the blog after you're done with the video. The link will be in the sidebar. It goes over motor options, batteries, and all the parts that you'll need to finish phase 2. Let's go ahead and continue on with the build. Okay, before we can install the rest of the equipment, we need to go ahead and mark the center of gravity onto the bottom of the wing. I'm pretty much going to be using an educated guess on this one. Paul's large delta wing that he has is pretty close in shape and size to this one, so we're going to use the center of gravity from his plane to get us close. On his, it's set at about 12 1/4 to 12 3/8 of an inch. So you're going to want to measure from the tip of the nose back about 12 1/4. I'm going to move it a little forward, so I think 12 1/4 would probably be better. It's better to be nose heavy than tail heavy for the first few flights. After you've marked it at 12 1/4, go ahead and draw a line across the bottom of the wing. We're going to be using that with the balancer to set it up when we put the rest of the parts onto the plane. If you don't have a balancer, you can make a pretty simple one just by using a couple pieces of wood that you'd use to make the stick mount. I just cut them to the same length and space them apart, wide enough to sit the wing on there, and glue them down with some CA. I have two different ones here. This one is one I use for planes that have wider wings, and ones that are a little bit smaller, I use this one. They work pretty good, and it's real cheap to make. Okay, this is the way the plane should sit with all the equipment on it. It should be sitting level and with the balancer right on the 12 1/4 inch line that we drew on the bottom of the wing. I've gone ahead and I've installed everything already on the plane. We're going to go ahead and go over it step by step. I'm going to go ahead and take the plane off the balancer, and then we'll take a look at each thing individually. Okay, since I know that everybody's going to be building this plane just a little bit differently, each person's going to have to balance their own plane with the equipment that they're going to be using. The best thing to do is set the plane up onto the balancer and lay the equipment out on top of the wing and spread it around till you get the plane to sit level with it on that 12 1/4 inch line. Everything's going to should be really close together like it is on this plane. There wasn't a whole lot of room. I had to scoot everything as close to the motor as I could. Basically, you want to start at the back. What I did is I installed the speed controller first. It's just Velcroed down. I cut a notch into the KF airfoil to fit it in there and put a piece of Velcro underneath it, and it's just going to sit right down in there. After installing the speed controller, I installed the receiver and the separate BEC. This 50 amp speed controller does not have a BEC on it, so you have to run a separate one, and it just solders onto the leads. The reason why I put these two in first is because they are a lot lighter than the battery, and the battery will give me more weight to shift forward to backward in order to get the balance right. So after I've embedded these into the wing, next you're going to want to go ahead and set the battery on top and move it forward and backward until you get the balance where you want it. It should be at 12 1/4 on the bottom of the wing. And then I just marked a line in front of the battery and behind the battery to show where it was going to be. And then you're going to need to make a slot for the battery to fit into. What I did is I cut through the first layer of foam and peeled it up first, and then after you get the first layer up, cut all the way through the second layer of foam until you hit the fiberglass. It's best if you don't use a knife to do this because you may cut the fiberglass. I use the Weller hot knife tool, the same one that Paul used in his video when he built his UPP park jet. If you don't have a hot knife, you could probably use a soldering iron but you want a low wattage one that's less than 20 watts. And basically just melt down until you feel the tip hit the fiberglass, and then just drag it along there. And what I did is I cut around it with the hot knife and then peeled up the foam. Once you have that done, try to fit everything all back together again. Stick the battery inside there and put it back on the balancer and make sure that it sits balanced at 12 1/4 inches. We may later cut this slot a little farther forward to give it some adjustability, but first I want to go ahead and cover the wing in the next phase of the build before we go ahead and do the final adjustments on the slot for the battery. A couple more quick notes before we finish up phase 2 and move on to phase 3 of the build. When you're installing the battery and the speed controller, you want to make sure to put them on the center line. Measure off the center line when you cut your squares to fit the battery and the speed controller. After that, I made sure I taped over the EEC and the receiver, and also I used some clear tape to tape down the servo wires so that they wouldn't be moving around. On the slot that I made for the battery, it is a little bit oversized on the back side. It allowed me to stuff all the extra wiring in behind the battery. So you can cut it back a little bit farther than it needs to be after you've marked it for getting the center of gravity right. Like I said, we'll go ahead and take a look at this again later after we get the tape onto the wing. The reason why I'm doing that is I know that after I tape the wing, it's going to change the center of gravity a little bit. Usually it moves it more to the back because you're adding more weight to the back of the plane because the wing is wider in the back than it is in the front. So we may need to slot this a little farther forward to bring the center of gravity back to where we need it. I think we're going to go ahead and finish up phase 2 here, and we'll be back soon to start phase 3 of the build, which is going to include doing the covering of the plane. And then after that, we'll be almost done. Now that phase 2 of the build is complete, be sure to check out the blog. There's a link in the sidebar. I've added new information about the build along, so please be sure to check it out. And thanks for watching RC Foam Fighters. We'll be back again soon to start phase 3.